back to Radio Wasteland, the best in anything, everywhere. I'm your host, Chauncey Allworth. This is my co-host, Kara Kittrick.
Hello.
How are you doing today, Kara?
Good. You mind if I go on a rant real quick?
No. I have a rant too, so let's trade rants.
Let's
first. All right.
Here on the Radio Wasteland Rant Exchange. Okay, so I was on Facebook the other day, much to my great shame, but I was looking at our messages for this show, and I happened to accidentally be exposed to my Facebook feed. And anyway, I saw like this recommended post, not from a group I follow, that's basically like a page that just does cringe posts from around the internet, which is not my thing, but I happened to see it. And basically the cringe post was this guy talking about their financial hardships because apparently they went like deep in debt to become a philosophy major. And they,
as you do,
right? Yeah, and they were saying that even though they're basically like one of the top scholars in their field, they can't get a job in their field that like pays the bills at all. So they're working all these dead end jobs, and they're unhappy with how the situation shook out. And predictably, all the comments are saying one of two things: this guy made bad personal choices. True. Philosophy is useless. Not true. But I think both of those comments hugely like missed the point. Like, I feel for this guy because, you don't make the debt decision for college when you're an adult. You get press ganged into it when you're like 16. And also,
what do these people not have kids? Don't they understand regret?
Yeah, no, it's like, well, it seems like this guy has a bad attitude about not working in philosophy. It's like, if he's one of the top scholars in his field, then he should be working in philosophy. And actually, it sucks that there aren't jobs available to him, because that means, like, we should have scholars. We should have people who know stuff about stuff. Like, this guy being upset that there are no jobs for something that is very important but just isn't funded is, I think, entirely justifiable. And yet the general public seemed to very much miss the point of that.
Well, I kind of feel like if he was that good of a philosopher, he could just change his bad attitude.
I mean, yeah, that's quite possible. And look,
now, my real feeling on this is I think it's the same feeling that I get when I hear people complain about like spending money on space,
right,
or spending money on any of the arts or any of the things that makes us better.
Yeah. And oftentimes I really feel like when I see people commenting on this stuff, they're coming at it just totally from this perspective of, it is impossible to change society. You can only make choices that like make your own life better. So this guy made bad personal decisions. Let's laugh at him. Ha. When it's like, no, he was not posting this to complain. He was posting it to be like, there's no money in research and that's bad. And that seems to have just like flown. They don't even consider that there could be like societal issues. It's just like, someone treats you in a racist way, well, you need to buck up and go somewhere where people aren't racist.
Right.
It's right. Someone runs over your dog, well, you shouldn't have let your dog outside. It's that is always the mindset that I see people taking to these comments. And it's like, sometimes the thing you're reading is not about the thing you're reading. And I don't know how people don't know that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that the issue that I would take from the article is that we don't have any jobs for philosophy, and we probably need to have a place for these people to go. It's like history.
Yeah.
History is a prime example. We need historians, but what are we going to do with them?
Right.
What are we going to do with these historians? We got to put them to work in schools and stuff like that, because frankly, when it comes to money, they're pretty worthless. Right. But not everything's about money.
Exactly. And people don't get that. People are like, I feel like a lot of this ties in kind of, but I feel like a lot of that sort of anti-science stuff we see is not people thinking they're being anti-science. Because slight tangent, years ago, I saw this poll online, and just on some website. It was like an ad, and it basically said, "Who's your favorite scientist?" And there were a bunch of options. It was like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, Elon Musk. And of the people on the list, the only one of them who was a scientist, who works as a scientist, was the girl who discovered that, who compiled the picture of the black hole, which was big in the news at the time. Everyone else on the list was an engineer, a businessman, or a pundit. People love science when it's building rockets, but that's not science. All the physical theories that are used to do that were discovered years and decades ago, in some cases centuries ago, by eggheads you would probably scoff at for wasting their time for doing useless stuff. That's just engineering. That's applying the stuff we know, which is also very valuable, obviously. But another prime example.
We need the translators, because
exactly.
Those of us that are, worrying about digging ditches and the non-science stuff in this world, people like me, I need an interpreter.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, I think it's not even just about interpreting. It's about, for instance, the technology behind the internet, right, was created in 2 universities by some random academics in the 60s. And it wasn't until, decades later that it...
Al Gore? Was his name Al Gore?
It was not Al Gore. I don't even know their names, which is kind of the point. They never got rich off it, certainly, even though it's that was the discovery that basically underpins our modern world. But, people look at guys like that and they're like, pointy-headed eggheads doing random stuff. At the time, it was just a novelty. 2 computers talk to each other on the other sides of the country. I'm sure there were people who were like, couldn't they be doing something more useful?
Right.
And now it's it's changed our entire world.
Absolutely.
And the people who got rich off of it are not the people who discovered it. They're the people who figured out how to market it and make it consumable, which again, just as important. But we applaud those guys and we shower them with wealth. And the science guys, they can't get jobs. They can't support themselves.
There are understandable concerns here. All right. So I'll play devil's advocate. And that is
Please do.
That, we definitely need a world of dreamers. I mean, but a world with too many dreamers means nobody gets to eat. So the fear, a lot of the time, I think there's 2 fears here. There's the civic fear and the personal fear. The personal fear is one of those, oh, you think you're better than me kind of things.
Right.
Which, I don't think goes on quite as often as we like to think, but it's a much more humorous fear than the other one. The civic fear is that, how will the system continue without people actually doing the work? Sure, it's great having people gilding the edges of the machine, but we don't actually need the gilded edges to make the machine work. We need those to make the machine better. And right now the machine isn't working, but arguably it's never really worked. It's always a work in progress.
See, this is the thing I'm talking about, though, because I think people see scientists as gilding the edges, but that is fully not what they're doing. They're designing the next machine.
Right, but at the time when this guy was putting together this novelty, he wasn't thinking, I'm going to change the world and soon people will be able to play massive multiplayer online games together.
No, maybe
Parents
not.
will never have to see their children again.
The way science works is that 99% of, you do 999, you do 1,000 studies, 999 of them are going to just confirm what you already knew and be useless. And then you get one study that shows something weird, and then that's the study that is useful to some degree, possibly a world-changing degree. And there's no way around that. You can't train better scientists and get better results. It's a lottery that you need a certain amount of brilliance to enter, but after that, it's just discovering the truths of the universe, which it's up to the universe if it cooperates, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I think we need more scientists playing the lottery so we advance faster.
Oh, I agree, but I mean, I think that there's a lot of issues in this world that, an example, I have a hard time with this one because, it starts to sound like socialism, which in some areas isn't bad. And don't jump on me just yet.
I'm
I see the
restraining
look in your
myself.
eye.
The mad gleam.
Yeah. But, like recently with the vaccine,
Yeah.
they're just all, when they were going to recoup their money. It's like, no, the governments of the world need to get together and be all, here's $10 billion. Shut up. We're taking your vaccine, we're putting this thing together, and we're going to provide it to anybody who wants it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but even in this world affecting situation, we couldn't do that. We spent 10 billion trying to get people to take it and another 10 million paying them, but we didn't just do it. Something that we know. And for you listeners, this isn't just do it, force it on the elderly or whatever, hold them down and make them take it. This is, we did it and we provided it to people. Take it if you want to. Why didn't we do that?
Well, I mean, I think we kind of did do that. Like anyone who wants the vaccine can get it if they're in the US.
Those companies are recouping their money. We can't. Those companies are producing the vaccine, and it is still their product.
I see what you mean. No, yeah, and that's the kind of thing. I think scientific discovery, even though that's not quite the same thing I'm talking about, because that again is still very much like applied science, whereas I'm talking about more like just basic research stuff. But like, it's often
my point is
fund.
You should be behind those sorts of things. The government, not the government, society should be a forerunner in sciences and arts and all the things that make us something better. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you said what I was going to say, basically.
Now it's
also it's just like, it's hard to privatize discovery because, if you are a huge oil company and you give some researcher like $1 million or whatever to like research oil or whatever, you can't necessarily trust what they're going to tell you because it's going to be profit motivated by like what will get me the next grant. It has, and even if it is not profit motivated, like the best you can do is use their results as propaganda. If they discover anything useful, it won't be useful for 20 years. And it might not be useful to you.
Science to recoup money.
Yeah.
And what did you say? Something a discovery? You can't profit off a discovery, or you can't.
Well, I'm just saying because it's impossible to know what avenues of research are going to yield world-changing discoveries. Like you can't like be the investor who got on the ground floor at the university level. You can't. There's no way to get like private investment into money into science until much later.
Yeah, I wasn't saying it very well, but that's kind of what I was saying.
Right.
The vaccine is like, imagine if the people who discovered the mRNA treatment decided to not let anybody know about their secret sauce, and then it couldn't be applied over here to somebody else who learned from their papers, their discoveries.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Science is supposed to be like open by design, which is the exact opposite of how it works in the business world. So I don't know. That's my rant. My rant is that people, it's not even that I think people hate science. It's that I think they literally don't even recognize what science is when they're seeing it.
Yeah. No. I have to say that my rant is not quite as valuable to the
Look, here on Radio Wasteland, we accept all rants, big and small.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm a very patient man. I like to think of myself. I'm impatient. I'm incredibly
counterpoint.
Impatient, actually. I'm incredibly impatient, but just with internalized. I'm not an irritable man.
You seethe quietly, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I quietly fester.
Yeah, good.
With dignity, I fester with dignity. But so
new tagline.
Once a week, they come through and they leaf blow and they clean up the neighborhood. And I swear to God, for 4 hours today, that guy was sitting there playing with the damn switches outside of my door, I know it looks like a church in here, but it's actually my garage that I've turned into my studio. So the insulation that a normal house gets is not there. So I got this jackass out there playing with the damn leaf blower for like 4 hours. And finally, I don't know what came over me. I just lost it. I was just like so irritated. I was like walking back and forth. I was like imagining just beating this guy in the face because he's out there eating a dang sandwich and he didn't have the decency to turn the thing off in the meantime. I just like emotionally lost it to the point where I almost postponed us doing Radio Wasteland for half an hour, but I ended up like letting myself sort of like fall asleep at my desk listening to unhappy Ukrainians on CNN. And then when I woke up, I like felt a little better, but earlier I was like ready to just go take a nap. I was like done with the day. I'm just all like, it's the only way this guy's going to survive is if I just walk away.
God, I don't know what to say about that other than I feel like in 200 years or something, people will hear that and they'll be like, that is such a 21st century sentence.
Totally.
They'll be like, that is quintessentially early 20th century.
Right, totally. What, mommy? You mean leaves didn't blow themselves back then?
No, yeah. I mean just the whole thing about now, like baby. About just like sad Ukrainians and the filter behind you.
Right.
Just
yeah, totally.
like I feel it all just it's like our modern today equivalent of like 19th century Gothic horror. It's like, when the Iceman came by, but he made such a ruckus, I was forced to take some laudanum and lie down.
Right, and they always take large spans of time and like compact them into one. So like you and I are be all like, Radio Wasteland's totally gnarly, and they'll like be all like, oh yeah, they said gnarly back then too.
Maybe we should do that. Maybe our audience for Radio Wasteland is actually future generations. And
maybe Radio Wasteland should be a time capsule.
Yeah. I think it already is.
Future generations. We're not talking about aliens. We're talking to aliens. Future aliens. You're not ready to commit. Okay.
I mean, I think at the very least we should put our interviews on some hard drives and bury them somewhere.
Oh no, once the radio waves are out there, I mean, they're out there.
Oh, that's true. But then we're sort of competing with all the other people. I think would be better to
have confidence in your product.
True.
Right.
Well, that's for the aliens, but for the people in the like post-apocalyptic hellscape after the fall or whatever, we need to carve all the transcripts onto some tablets and just have them on top of a mountain somewhere.
Tungsten blocks,
yes. My tungsten budget is totally shot for the year, so you're gonna have to foot the bill for the tungsten blocks.
We're gonna have to trim some words from the leaf blower story because we're not gonna be able to fit it all on this block of tungsten.
Like, just buy some more tungsten. Like, this is all the tungsten. This is all the tungsten in the world.
Yeah. And I'm only halfway through the leaf blower thing. All right. Well, in the meantime, Kara, do you have any news for us?
Yes, I do. Rant's over. So a new study suggests that your life may actually flash before your eyes. Although to call it a study is a little generous since the sample size was literally one person. But what happened was that researchers at the University of Louisville were conducting a brainwave study on epilepsy when a patient suddenly had a heart attack and died right in the middle of the brain recording they were doing. And in the 30 seconds before and after his heart stopped, i.e. his time of death, his brainwaves showed signs associated with intense dreaming and with memory recall. Bad news for that guy, but interesting news for science.
So we think we saw that his life flashed before his eyes, or that they flushed out all the... Maybe your body just panics and it basically does everything at once. Because, okay, so when people die, I don't know if this is true or just something that people talk about. They go potty.
I believe that's correct. Yes.
Okay.
I believe they have, for like lethal injections, they have like stuff.
Maybe we kind of do that all over. Like your body's just all, try everything.
Yeah.
We're about
Hit
to
all the
die.
switches.
Try everything, and one of which is throw out every memory and see if that sticks.
Yeah, honestly, that's as good as an explanation as I've ever heard. I think that, makes the most sense, is just that, like, the brain they just hit all the buttons.
Yeah.
And
Or like when you turn on a piece of audio equipment and all the lights come on and then they go off and it just leaves the power light. It's the opposite of that.
yeah. No, I think this is interesting though, because like 50 years ago, like near-death experiences used to be a very, very taboo topic in science. No one wanted to talk about near-death experiences, and there was actually,
Because of God stuff, I assume.
yeah, basically because of the religious implications. And there was one woman, I forget her name, but basically she kind of like invented the concept of modern hospice care. Like before that, it was just kind of take him home, whatever. Like she kind of invented the concept of treating death with dignity in a medical setting. As crazy as that sounds.
I like how that had to be invented.
Oh yeah, and it had to be invented in like the 50s.
Right.
But in any case, so she was obviously like a big deal because she was this amazing pioneer. But like the last, I think, 20 years of her life, she kind of devoted to studying near-death experiences because they kept coming up in her work on hospice care. And that basically kind of got her like blacklisted by the scientific community. Like no one wanted to publish her like near-death experience stuff. No one wanted to talk about tunnels or anything like that. So it's nice that we've sort of come a long ways since then, where people are willing to talk about near-death experiences and willing to, and in this case it was just a death experience, but we were able to see that maybe this validates what some near-death experiencers have been saying.
Yeah, we've come to a point where scientists are allowed to have an imagination.
Right.
Yeah. Blacklisted by the science community, and now we got, like, I always say his name wrong, but Michiro Kaku.
Oh yeah.
Michio Kaku.
Talking about could aliens exist? Near-death experience is a big one for him. And real credible interpreters. I don't know. Well, we talked about this in the last segment. Neil deGrasse Tyson is the head of the Hayden Planetarium, isn't he?
Right.
So
I'm just saying that
does
he's
that
not
not
like,
make him a scientist?
Well, like certainly he is a trained scientist, just like
he's not actively sciencing.
Well, yeah, I don't know that he's doing any research anymore. I don't know that he's publishing anything. Yeah, I don't know that he's part of like the process of discovery, which I mean, I'm not coming down on him. I think what he's doing
where
is
we draw the line, and maybe we need a word for these interpreters, because in my opinion, it's a noble job.
Exactly. Yeah, I think
maybe we need a word for them so that people don't go like, oh, because my brother-in-law, his name is Bong. So Bong, he was basically a scientist for years when I first married Terry, and knew him because basically he did daily blood research on diabetes, basically testing blood every day, and he hated it. He wanted a better job.
Right. No, most research sucks as a job.
Yeah. I mean, he liked the nobility part of it. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
yeah.
He didn't like be all like, oh, I'm wasting my life helping people with diabetes. It's like,
no, but like the compensation is bad. Right, as are the hours and the benefits and everything else that you look for in a job.
Right. And plus he had gone to school to be a teacher that teaches people going to school about brain surgery, about neuroscience. So he had his degree in teaching neuroscience, whatever that is. I don't expect you to know.
I don't know.
Right. But let's say your life does flash before your eyes at the end of your life. How does that help?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why is this something that we even need to know? I guess.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we don't know.
until you know.
It could be that whatever brain mechanism is responsible for your life flashing before your eyes is like responsible for basic cognition too. It could be that this tells us like something big about the way the brain works. We don't know yet. It's part of something that other scientists later will be able to refer to. Like, it's one puzzle piece. It's like picking up one puzzle piece from a jigsaw puzzle and saying, well, this seems useless. But
Well,
you put it all together and now you have a picture.
when I was like in 7th grade, I was not an athletic kid. I was playing D&D a lot. Wore a trench coat. I had a briefcase with my D&D stuff in it.
Yes.
Huge.
Oh, I love it.
And in PE we had wrestling. And this kid, I don't know, we were 7th grade. This kid must have been over 200 pounds. Huge.
Right.
And I mean, he was an overweight kid, but he was also a big kid,
Sure.
He was just a big
like
kid.
A wrestler build.
Right, yeah. And I had to wrestle this dude in a stinky math room that was converted to the wrestling room for the week, and I lost in like 20 seconds. And there was a lot of smells and pains and feelings in there. And am I going to have to relive that? Is that one of the things? So that's one of the things I want to know. Do I get to relive the good stuff, or do I have to relive wrestling that kid in 7th grade?
God, I don't know. I mean, it's not clear from this thing, as I understand it. Like near-death experiencers who have had this experience, but then like lived at the last second they survived.
Mm-hmm.
I think have said it was like their most important memories, but some have said no, it was my whole life. So I don't know. I think you need to make your peace with that memory.
All right.
Or just not die suddenly. Far-right lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene appeared as a guest speaker at a white nationalist conference. Far-right lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene appeared as a guest speaker at a white nationalist conference, where, among other things, the organizer praised Adolf Hitler to cheers from the crowd and led a chant of Vladimir Putin's name. This, of course, prompted condemnation from other Republican leaders and from the Republican Jewish coalition. Greene initially said she didn't know what the event was for, but has since gone on to defend her participation, saying, quote, "We're not going to be deterred by journalists and Washington insiders who fear the name of our Lord." So that's fun. In 2020, she won her district with more than 70% of the vote.
Okay. Yeah, I'm always curious what the people in, so living in Reading, lots of people won, and I knew lots of people who voted, and none of us had a huge grasp on our local representatives.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm always a little curious how the people in her town are just all like, oh God, oh man, that made a big mistake on it. She sounded good at that one thing that I watched. It's like,
right. No, I expect and hope that that's what it is, that like the people who vote for her are longtime Republicans who see the R next to their name, which like we've all done it with local politics and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Even though it's not.
I try not to, but
I have as well. And I do try not to. I've been a lot better about it in the last few years, but like, although I will say she is not that local. Like she serves in Washington. She's not a state representative. She's a national representative of the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but of a small, she's not a senator.
No, she's not a senator. And I think her district is pretty small in terms of population. But like, so I would hope that the people who are voting for her just like are not, think that she's a regular Republican and are not aware of stuff like this. Because man, I I do not know, even if you were like willing to extend the maximum amount of benefit of the doubt to this woman, how you come away with this from this with any conclusion other than she is also a white nationalist. You know, I don't know how you do that.
Well,
Maybe
I'll
there's
tell you how. I do this, and it pisses my wife off because I'm always defending people. Like when something comes up, I'm all, well, maybe this happened or maybe that happened. And my joke that I always say to her is, well, I'm just a naive 46-year-old man, you know, which was some joke that was made about Al Franken when he did his stuff that got him,
right,
you know, got
right, yeah,
the naive 46-year-old man.
Speaking of sucky politicians,
yeah, but this white nationalist thing, I wonder if she knew when she went, because I've thought about this, you know, there's this great movie called The Green Room about this punk band that goes and plays this punk show, and everything's going fine until they realize that they're actually playing at a Nazi clubhouse, and it turns into this like awesome horror movie, like escape revenge movie. So they obviously didn't know that they were scheduled to play at the Nazi clubhouse. Did Marjorie Taylor Greene know that she was scheduled to play at the Nazi clubhouse? I guess that's what
so I guess there's a couple things. In her defense, she wasn't physically there. She was asked to be like a video speaker at this thing. So she sent a video. So she wouldn't have heard like the Hitler comments. Okay. On the other side, though, as I understand it, she was asked by Nick Fuentes, the organizer. And if you Google Nick Fuentes' name, he's a Nazi. Like, there's no ambiguity to like the top results. And I don't know, maybe she thought, they call everyone Nazis these days and just didn't check it.
Yeah.
But like, that's also bad.
Fuentes. You know, you're not automatically going to jump. I mean, I know they're Spanish people, but I mean, I don't know.
I don't know either, but I think.
And then you say she chimed in with chanting Vladimir Putin?
Well, she didn't chime in, but like there was a Putin chant led at the rally where they were like Putin, Putin. So
again,
Putin.
Her being on Zoom, she might not.
She just gave her, you know, she is also a member of the far right. Like she is as far as you can go, basically, to the right on the Republican Party.
Right.
So she gave her message, which I will say I looked at some of the stuff that was being said at this conference. Apart from overt approval of Adolf Hitler, it's all pretty much the same as stuff that Marjorie Taylor Greene says on the regular. So,
yeah, but that's a big step.
Yeah, no, it is a big step. But like, I'm just saying.
I get you, and that's part of why I find this stuff so interesting, because it's like, am I naive? Is this like Harry Potter and there's like some secret Hogwarts alley of like racists trying to keep the minority down that I don't know about? It's like, I mean, sure, I hear people say some stuff sometimes, or, you know, some guys, well, I'm not letting that happen, but it's like, I don't imagine them going to a back room and getting people elected and yeah, it's just weird. It's weird that might be going on, that there's like some Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for Nazis. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like,
no, I do. I think perhaps you are naive about that, and I don't know. I think
just
maybe
a naive 46-year-old man,
right? Well, I am too, because you know what? I don't know anyone in my life who is like that. Because I've met people who were like that. I've met people who were like my friends for a little while, and they said some like not like I had a friend who was really good friend with for a while from Canada, and then they said a couple of like questionable things, which I was like, whatever, English is not their first language. Their first language is French, even though they speak English really well. And I'm like, they're probably just kind of conservative, whatever. And then one day they totally dropped that. Yeah, I wish there were fewer brown people in Canada. And then just went on this rant about like, you know, Canada's for the people who live here, which I was like, okay, but non-white people live in Canada. And she's like, kind of. was like, okay. And I never spoke to her again because that's screwed up, right? So
yeah,
I think you and I have probably consciously or unconsciously cut the Nazis out of our diet. And so we don't realize they're there.
huh?
So.
Yeah, but was she part of a group? Were there little meetings? Did she go to little meetings? Was it part of her voting? She's all like, over here, it's like, I agree with like giving more money to this, but this person's for getting rid of the brown people. So that person's going to get my vote. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah, well,
it's so hard for me to wrap my brain around. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I
get it.
Hard for me to wrap my brain around.
I mean, this was a political action conference. They were raising money for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, I haven't heard that she is like not going to accept money from, like, she hasn't even condemned what she heard. She said at first, I didn't know what it was for. And then she did a 180 degree and started talking about how the Republican establishment has no right to criticize her because she's a true Christian and they're not, which I would think if she was there by mistake, then she would be like, I was there by mistake, which is not the tack. That's the tack she took for like a day. And then she changed her tune. So that makes me a little skeptical of her intentions.
Well, I do know a lot of card-carrying Christians, and they do have weekly little meetings in a building somewhere. And most of them are opposed to being racist. The ones I know, at least.
Yeah. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene has done the opposite of what we do, and I think she has cut the non-Nazis out of her diet, probably.
Right.
I think she probably doesn't interact with a whole lot of normal Christians.
Yeah. Well, somebody needs a reminder that Jesus was Jewish at best. At best.
Wait, what? You mean like he was also Middle Eastern?
If he wasn't Jewish, he was brown. And, somebody needs to remind these people.
They don't want to hear it.
All right, what do you got?
Okay, last one. So a piece of space junk is set to collide with the moon soon, the first time this has happened. While initially experts believed it was debris from a SpaceX launch, it's now thought that it was part of a discarded piece from a Chinese lunar mission from 2014. Now, there is no agency that tracks space debris this far from Earth, which is a growing problem since the amount of space junk has increased exponentially in the last few years. And if a piece of space junk were ever to collide with a satellite or space station, it would definitely destroy it, since some of them travel like 15 times faster than bullets. The impact on the moon won't be visible from Earth, but it could tell scientists something about the way craters form on the moon, which in turn could give us new insights into space.
I never really thought about space junk that far out. I mean, surely there was one or two things from not one or two, but 1 or 200 things from the Apollo missions. And then when you said that they thought that it might be the SpaceX, I'm just, oh man, that thing got there quick.
Well, there have been a bunch of
drifting piece of junk. It's like the Apollo missions were fired there on purpose and had to do all this calculating in order to get the gravity to get there. And SpaceX junk is just getting there. Now, don't get me wrong. It's just mind blowing. I guess I never really thought about that, but I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do we have any sort of laws on the books where we're trying to set something up to stop space junk, or is this eventually just going to turn into a ring around our planet like the Transformers the movie, or like that big pile of trash that's out in the Pacific?
I don't know a lot about this, but as I understand it, space law in general is very. It's all in the level of like UN agreements, where if people want to break it, basically they can, and there's no because there's no oversight of like the entire world,
Right.
So it's all a bunch of tacit agreements among spacefaring countries, but I don't think But that mostly concerns other stuff. I don't know if there really even is a plan for space junk. A few years ago, Russia launched a missile to destroy one of their defunct satellites, which created a huge amount of debris, which apparently threatened the International Space Station, which made like a bunch of other countries really mad. So obviously Russia is, as we're seeing in the news, maybe a little more likely to push the boundaries of international law than a lot of other countries. But I think it really is like, you can do what you want and people will make frowny faces at you.
What is the advantage of shooting a missile at something?
It's
not a big enough missile to atomize it.
Right.
You're playing 52 pickup at that point. That's like, well, I guess you're not, because you're not picking it up.
I'm sure I'm sure there's a reason they did this. I unfortunately don't know what it was. But
yeah, well, we definitely need to do something about space junk, because eventually it's going to be difficult to, how long is it going to be until Elon Musk is sending up some rich people, that end up getting lobotomized by a bolt that's traveling through it.
Right.
Mach 7,
Yeah.
At that point, they're going to be all, we need to get this cleaned up,
Yeah, and I don't know
our
how
risk
you
assessment is not really good in this country. For the amount of, I got to say, for the amount of taxes I pay, I feel like our risk assessment should be a little better.
I agree. I think it mostly goes to making tanks so people in Arkansas have jobs. But
yeah, well, I mean, that's good. And because I'm a believer that if my enemy, it's not a great world where we all have weapons, but in a world where Russias do exist, our weapons do keep them at bay, obviously. So I'm okay with that. But also at the same time, it's like, COVID happens and they're just, oh crap, we only have 12 respirators. Why don't you have a whole, I paid taxes, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think, I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, there were like pandemic, right? We were talking on the show, as I've said a bunch of times, about like, there were a bunch of news articles in the years leading up to COVID when we were doing this show, where every 6 months or so I would bring an article that was like, experts say we are not even remotely, even slightly kind of prepared for a pandemic. And the response to stuff like that is, geez, that sounds bad.
Yeah.
we never did anything. No one did anything to get money for that or anything. So like
well, let me ask you this. Do you like to yard sale? Has there ever been a point in your life that you like to go to yard sales?
No, but I'm curious where you're going with this.
Okay. Personally, I like to go to yard sales.
That's reasonable. They're very economic.
We go to yard sales, but sometimes we pull by a house and we're just all, that place is a crap heap. And we are not going to that yard sale because it's gross. My question for you is, how many opportunities to meet alien life have we missed out on because they drove by and saw that our yard was a mess?
It's not what I was expecting you to say, but...
Well, really, I mean, they're going to come by and they're going to be all, no, that's a hard pass. This place is gross, I just saw a bolt fly by at Mach 7 with a little chunk of brain on it,
Yeah, they're trying to get to our planet, but they can't approach because there's so much shrapnel.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we would love to bring the secret of universal life, health, and happiness to these people, but there's this bolt there, and we're really worried about it.
Yeah. Well, it's already, it's tasted human blood once. Now it's got a knack.
God, the bolt.
Right.
New sci-fi B movie. The bolt. The people in space. I think
it's like Gravity. I haven't seen Gravity, but they might have already made it.
Yeah. Have you heard about Moonrise?
No.
It's this new movie about, I guess, basically the moon coming to life and attacking the Earth. I saw trailers for it.
Like Majora's Mask?
I think there's like this weird inky substance in the moon. Like it's like that Doctor Who episode where it's like an egg for something horrible. I don't know.
I did see that.
Yeah, well, I never watched the movie, but
No, I meant the Doctor Who. I saw that.
oh yeah. Well, this is. I'm just worried that like the guy who came on that one time and told us that like the moon is a space station, if he's right and this thing hits the moon, I'm a little worried that the inhabitants will retaliate.
Yeah, well, given the news from a couple of weeks ago, space stations have sewer systems, and the news a couple of weeks ago is that the New York sewer system is breeding new crazy viruses. So even if it's an ancient alien thing, Lord knows what's lurking down there in their sewer systems.
God. Yeah, we're bringing together all the news articles into one mega thing to be worried about: lunar sewage.
This is movie script gold. We're going to have to talk about this off camera. All right, you're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Kara, no mythology today. Tell me about a defunct theory. Tell me something interesting. Pique my interesting lobes.
Well, I'm glad you asked, Chauncey, spontaneously.
Because I'm questioning how I asked it, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to stimulate your lobes, but for thousands of years, basically from the time of antiquity up into the Renaissance and Enlightenment, it really held on until like the 1850s. People believed that certain, well, it's called the theory of spontaneous generation. The theory basically states that creatures like fleas and maggots are not descended from parents, but rather form spontaneously from certain types of matter. Basically, if you have a big enough hunk of rotten cheese sitting around, they thought, then the cheese and like the dust around it will start spontaneously becoming flies. This was thought to work through primal elemental interactions between different types of matter: warm matter, wet matter, light, heat, cold, etc. Early in the 1st century BC, Vitruvius, a Roman architect, advised that libraries be placed facing eastward for good morning light, but not with windows facing south or west, since the south and west winds could spontaneously generate bookworms. This belief persisted throughout the Middle Ages. One of my favorite and wildest stories is that stating that because the barnacle goose was thought to form spontaneously from a type of barnacle, hence the name, therefore it A, proved the virgin birth, and B, proved that the barnacle goose was actually properly considered a type of fish and therefore acceptable to eat during Lent. Shakespeare talks about snakes and crocodiles forming from the mud of the Nile. And nevertheless, many religious people did object to spontaneous generation, finding that the idea that life could spontaneously form from the chaos of the world to be irreligious, sort of pagan, since it was based on Greek myth, as God was supposed to have created everything with intention. People first started doing experiments to disprove spontaneous generation in the late 1600s and found that the church was right. And by the 1850s, with the experiments of Louis Pasteur on this, famous for the process of pasteurization, its advocates were forced to admit it wasn't true, and it basically fell out of the popular consciousness.
Wonder how society dealt with that, because we're dealing with that stuff right now, a lot of science this, science that, and then when science comes out, do people just go like, oh, well, I wasn't sure anyway? It's like,
Yeah.
or maybe, like you said, science just progresses one death at a time. But, that makes sense. You look at the world, you see what happens. And, this is why people think the earth is flat. They went out their front door and it looked flat. And they said, like, hey, you're tricking me.
Right. And yeah, this originated with like a lot of creatures have eggs that are too small to see.
Right.
So that's the root of spontaneous generation theory. And people sort of worked into that, like ideas about the 4 elements and ideas about like, because the Greek view of cosmology was that everything began with chaos. Chaos in our modern parlance generally means like disorder, like randomness. To them, the word chaos literally means an opening. It meant void. And the idea was that things could spontaneously generate. So basically the first gods spontaneously generated from chaos, who created everything. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of magic.
Right.
Thinking that the bookworms come from which wind? Who cares? That the bookworms come from the wind. It's beautiful. Yeah. There's no magic like that in my life.
I know. Honestly, I think it would be so cool if spontaneous generation was real. Like, inconvenient, but interesting.
Yeah. But I've played enough video games to know that it'd be scary to go walking in the park or out in a field because, you might spontaneously
it's just like random
some
encounters.
Sort of bad guy that you got to fight.
Yeah.
And it's like your Pokemon's tired and you're just not ready for it.
Right. So spontaneous generation never fell out of favor in the Pokemon universe. The Pokemon are spontaneously generated from the tall grass.
Yeah. Yeah. Spawning points. Yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, I think this is a reasonable, because, scientific theories, and this wasn't a scientific theory by any means in the modern sense, it was developed by philosophers. Not people doing any form of the best they had method.
At the time.
Right. But it's the analog. It formed the same function in society. These things, I think, ultimately, all theories we go with them because they're practical. And this is, in many ways, a practical theory. It stems from the observation, if you leave rot and dirt and stuff everywhere, then you're going to get flies. It doesn't matter why it's wrong exactly.
Right.
It tells you, get rid of this stuff, it's going to spontaneously generate. And if it makes a few, false predictions, so people end up doing silly things like not putting windows so that there are bookworms, it's still like, it's mostly useful. And that's all theory had to be to stick around. It's mostly useful.
Yeah, I gotta say, they're not wrong. If you take an apple and you take some wet matter and some warm matter and leave them outside long enough, you will get maggots on that sucker.
Right. And it's kind of like Occam's razor. To people, this was like, well, this is simpler than invisible eggs. This makes more sense to us. This is more pleasing to us. And in absence of any evidence to prove that it's, because actually these creatures are laying invisible eggs theory is almost as old. Like, that was a rival theory to spontaneous generation. But people liked spontaneous generation more, basically. And since they didn't have evidence either way, they went with the one they liked more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally like it more too, because it's got some magic to it.
Yeah.
As for anybody listening, my day job is I'm a web developer. I do website stuff. And there's a lot of website nerds that are just all like, oh, yeah, well, it needs to be done the right way. And this is the right way. And there's no other way to do it. And I'm constantly because I teach some classes about this too. And I constantly have to say to them, no, the right way is to get it done on time and within budget. That's the right way, And so once it's done, you move on. If you have some extra time, you then think about better ways that you could do it in the future and so on and so forth. And you were just saying this about it was the working theory at the time. And it is the working theory. It works. It's not exactly a pressing issue. Let's leave that for a bit until we have some time to work on this side hobby of ours with the invisible eggs and spontaneous.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And it's real. A lot of people don't know, but like Greek doctors, Paracelsus and stuff, they saved people. They did, in fact, save lives. Obviously, they were much worse than like modern doctors. But they weren't really that much worse than like 19th century doctors.
Yeah, if they had just washed their hands, they probably wouldn't have been that bad.
No, exactly. Yeah, and they had wild beliefs. They
had they known about the invisible eggs,
right?
And washed their hands, it wouldn't hurt.
They didn't remotely understand how the body worked, but what they did was they saved lives because they wrote everything down. They had a patient who presented a certain way, they wrote it down, send it on to the next person. They know this patient presented this way, they'll get X, Y, and Z. We don't know why, probably because like spirit humors in the blood or some magical nonsense. Best treat, of all the people who had this, the only one who lived got this herb, so maybe try that herb.
Right. There's an old SNL with Steve Martin, and he's like the town barber, which at the time was like the doctor or whatever in some old town, Middle Ages town. And somebody comes up and their stomach is hurting and stuff like that. And he's just all, oh, I'm possessed. I have a stomach ache and blah, blah, blah. And he's all, yes, we used to think that you had a demon and you were possessed. But now we know that a small dwarf has taken up residence in your stomach. Just go ahead and take this and that'll take care of it, And it's like a whole bunch of like, we used to believe this bat caca thing and now we believe this one.
Right.
And well.
Yeah, reality isn't any less weird.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you my invisible egg story before we're out of here.
All right.
My wife is a year older than I am, and her best friend is a year younger. I actually met her best friend first when I was 15, and I met her best friend, and she introduced me to Terry, my wife, when she was 16, and that's when we all met each other and became friends.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when I was friends with the friend, she comes over and she had a baby young. She had a baby just prior to turning 15. So she comes over and she's spending the night at my house, platonic, not getting weird. And she brings her baby and I cooked him dinner and I cook him some rice. Matt was there. Maybe he cooked. Doesn't matter. We cook some rice. We eat the rice. It's all great. And she's looking through the rice and she like pulls up something and looks at it. And the rice was like 30% boll weevils. And we've been eating this. We fed our kid this. We all just ate like
I hate
boll weevils in the rice. And and she was like pissed, like you fed my baby boll weevils, and like,
well, yeah.
And we didn't know, and like I'll tell you this. To this day, this girl lives 2 blocks away from me, and I swear to God, once every 6 months at least, I hear about how I fed her baby boll weevils.
Okay, I mean, she can probably calm down if it's been like 30 years, but also,
yeah,
that's horrible.
All right, you're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come back next time.
Check your rice for boll weevils.